Welcome to another episode of Office Hours, the recap, where we go a little deeper into the discussion that we had in our Discord room over on Chatbotbuilder.ai. Let's get started.
We're taking a deep dive into a really cool real-time discussion that happened during an office hours session on March 19th, 2025.
Yeah, we're kind of eavesdropping on this session where we had Kim, Charles, Diana, Mir, Denise, Blaine, Jafear, and Chris all kind of digging into some pretty crucial, real-world challenges and sharing really practical tips about automation and building those cool AI bots.
Yeah, and so our goal today is to pull out the juiciest bits of their conversation, the most insightful moments, and kind of give you, the listener, a shortcut into understanding how people are tackling some of these really important aspects of bot development, how to organize your digital life, how to actually interact with your clients.
Exactly. You can think of this as like a concentrated dose of practical knowledge distilled from hours of their problem solving and experience.
But I think this is going to be particularly helpful because they were talking about things that a lot of people who are working online struggle with, like how to stay organized when you've got tons of automation workflows, different accounts.
Right, different projects, different clients potentially.
Exactly. And the whole sandbox versus live environment thing.
Oh, yeah. I mean, that can be a real headache.
So Mir actually kind of kicked things off talking about how overwhelming it can be to manage all that stuff. And especially when you're trying to remember, like, where the heck is that specific template? Or where's that one asset that I need right now?
And that's such a common problem, right? Like, we're all juggling so many digital assets these days.
Yeah, it's like digital hoarding, but with important stuff.
Absolutely. And it can really slow you down when you're trying to get things done.
Yeah, but Mir actually shared a pretty cool workaround that she's been using. She called it her Link Hub spreadsheet. It's part of a membership she's in, and it sounds like it's a game changer for her.
So basically, she's got all these different offers, opt-in forms, all the things that you need to manage when you're running an online business. And this spreadsheet allows her to centralize all of those essential entry points and, payment links and all that good stuff.
Yeah, and it seems like the key takeaway here is that centralization is so important. No matter what kind of tool you're using, you need that one single organized place for all your important stuff. And I think that becomes even more critical when you start to scale your business or, you're offering more and more stuff.
Right, you can't just rely on memory anymore. You need a system. And I liked how Mir actually showed them her CBB test spreadsheet. She had different tabs for different solutions. It was a really practical example.
Yeah, and she even talked about the frustration of having like a million Google Sheets with super generic names like contact info or notes or whatever.
Oh yeah, been there a million times.
We've all been there, right?
It's like finding a needle in a haystack.
And, as you create more offers, as you get more clients, that kind of organization becomes absolutely essential. So you don't miss out on leads, you don't lose those payment links, and no one likes losing money.
Absolutely not. And I think what Mir was saying about taking the time to set up a good system from the get-go, even though it might feel like a pain in the beginning, it's going to save you so much headache and stress in the long run.
Yeah, it's an investment in your sanity.
For sure.
Okay, so speaking of organization and tools, the conversation then kind of shifted to what people are using to actually keep their digital lives in order. And Mir actually shared her experience with Notion.
Okay.
But it sounds like it's been a bit of a love-hate relationship.
Yeah.
She's been trying to use Notion consistently for like a whole year.
Wow.
And she's still running into issues with the search functionality, which is kind of ironic because Notion is often praised for being, this great organization tool.
You would think that search would be one of their strengths.
Yeah, you would think so. And it's interesting because this actually led her back to using Google Sheets and Docs, which some people might consider kind of old school.
Right. But they're reliable.
Exactly. And they work for her. So it just goes to show that, the best tool is the one that you're actually going to use consistently, and that fits your workflow.
Absolutely. And, sometimes the newest, shiniest tool isn't necessarily the best for everyone.
So then Diana actually chimed in with a totally different perspective. She loves Notion, especially the database features and how you can kind of create relationships between different pieces of information.
Okay, that's cool.
Yeah, she uses it for managing her clients, but also for her own personal projects.
That's smart, having everything in one place.
And she even talked about how she uses Notion for setting reminders with dates and notifications. So it's not just about organizing information. It's kind of like a project management tool for her as well.
Yeah, and I think that highlights the power of these platforms that can do multiple things. It's not just about notes or documents.
Right. It's about connecting different parts of your work and your life. Mir did admit that Notion probably does have a steeper learning curve than something like Google Sheets. So that can definitely be a barrier for some people. But Diana actually offered to do like a little impromptu Notion class during a future session just to share her expertise with the group.
That's really generous of her. And, it speaks to the power of community and peer-to-peer learning. Sometimes we can learn so much from each other.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that sparked a bigger point, which is that the really powerful tools, the ones that can really transform your work, often do require an initial investment of time and energy to learn. But the payoff can be huge.
Right. It's like anything worth having, you're going to have to put in some effort to learn it.
Exactly. And it's often easier to learn a new tool when you have a specific project or a goal in mind. Like you're not just learning for the sake of learning.
Yeah, you're solving a problem.
Exactly.
Okay.
So what came next?
So then the conversation shifted to something really practical, which is how to actually integrate chatbots into your website, to connect with your audience.
This is where the rubber meets the road. Exactly. And Denise and Chris both shared their experiences. They've both got chatbots live on their sites, and it was really interesting to hear their perspectives.
Okay, so they're kind of walking the walk.
Yeah, and Chris actually gave some really cool examples of different bots he's worked on. He talked about their own branded version of CBB called IntelliAgent, and then they've got bots for clients in all these different industries.
Oh, wow. Like what?
So there's one for MBI, which is all about collecting data. Another one for InstaTurf. They do storm erosion mitigation. And then there's this really cool one called Hermie.
Hermie. Okay, I'm intrigued.
Yeah, so Hermie is actually integrated with a big commerce store that sells hermit crabs.
Wow, that's niche.
Yeah, and it's designed to answer questions about hermit crabs. If you need help finding a specific size of habitat based on how many crabs you have, it'll actually link you directly to the right product in the store.
That's pretty smart, using a bot to guide people through the purchasing process.
And it gets even cooler because Chris mentioned that they've integrated Hermie with OpenAI so it can summarize all the questions that come in every week.
Okay, so they're using AI to automate their own internal processes too.
Exactly, so they don't have to spend hours sifting through tons of messages.
That's super efficient.
Yeah. So then Denise actually showed everyone her own website and how her chatbot works. And she kind of walked through the functionality and it answers questions about her marketing plans and stuff.
Okay.
And I thought it was interesting how she doesn't immediately ask for people's contact information, like when you first open the chat.
That's a good point.
She wants to kind of build trust first, provide value, answer those initial questions, and then later on she'll ask for the contact details.
That makes sense. You don't want to scare people off right away.
Yeah, exactly.
So were there any hiccups or any challenges that came up during this part of the conversation?
Actually, yeah, Diana was having an issue with her chatbot where it was loading previous conversations every time someone opened it.
Oh, that's not ideal.
Yeah, she wanted each new interaction to be like a fresh start, but the bot was kind of remembering everything from before.
So it was like carrying baggage from past conversations.
Exactly.
Yeah,
And you can imagine that could be kind of confusing for the user.
definitely.
So Charles and Denise actually jumped in with a solution, a code-based solution that involved clearing the local browser storage and the chat session data.
Okay, so getting a bit technical.
Yeah, it got a little bit techie there for a minute as they talked about how to implement the code in different website builders.
Because not all platforms are created equal.
Right, and they mentioned Framer specifically, which is
Yeah.
apparently a bit more complex.
Okay, so depending on your website platform, you might have to do a little bit more digging to find the right solution.
Yeah, exactly.
So was that the only solution, or were there other ideas floating around?
Jafear actually suggested a way to clear the chat within the chatbot's flow itself, like building it into the logic of the bot. But Denise explained that the code-based method was kind of cleaner because it happens instantly right at the moment the button is clicked to open the chat.
Okay, so it's a more immediate fix.
Yeah, and Kim actually had a really helpful suggestion for Diana. She suggested adding an audio option in English to the Portuguese intro video that Diana has on her landing page, just to make it more accessible to a wider audience.
That's a really good point. Sometimes we forget about those small details that can make a big difference in terms of accessibility.
Exactly. So then Denise went on to talk about how she really sees her chatbot as more than just a simple responder. She calls it an AI strategic advisor.
Ooh, that's a fancy title.
Yeah, she's trying to elevate it beyond just answering basic questions. She wants it to be like a problem-solving tool, and she's got a whole knowledge base that she's built up to kind of give the bot the information it needs.
Okay, so it's powered by her expertise.
Exactly. And again, she reiterated that she prefers to wait a bit before asking for contact information.
Okay, so sticking to that strategy.
But then she mentioned a problem that she and Kim actually spent a couple of months troubleshooting.
Oh, no, what happened?
So apparently there was this issue where the chatbot wouldn't smoothly resume the conversation after it collected someone's contact information, like there'd be this awkward break.
Yeah, that's not a good look. You don't want the conversation to just drop off like that.
Especially after someone's giving you their details, you want to keep that momentum going.
Right, you want to nurture that lead.
And this actually sparked a bigger discussion about whether a chatbot should even remember past conversations.
Okay, interesting debate.
Yeah, there were some different viewpoints. Some people thought it was convenient for the user. They don't have to repeat themselves. But then there were also concerns about privacy, especially if multiple people from the same company might be using the same computer to interact with the bot.
Yeah, that's a valid concern.
And ultimately, I think the takeaway was that it really depends on the purpose of the bot. If it's primarily for lead capture, maybe you don't need to remember every little detail of the conversation.
But if it's more of a support or nurturing tool, then maybe you do.
Exactly. And they also talked about what happens if someone asks to speak to a human. Like if they want to escalate the conversation, but then they close the chat window.
That's a good question. Like, how do you make sure that you don't lose them?
Yeah, you need to have a way to capture their information or follow up with them somehow so they don't just disappear into the void.
Okay, so making sure those leads don't slip through the cracks.
Exactly. All right, so then things took a turn for the even more techie and exciting. They started talking about some of the new AI tools that are out there.
Oh, this is where things get interesting.
Yeah, so Mir and Charles both mentioned a tool called Lovable, and apparently it's pretty powerful, but it can also be a bit of a rabbit hole.
I've heard that about Lovable. It's like you start using it and then suddenly 3 hours have gone by.
Yeah, exactly, and it sounds like it uses a credit-based system.
Okay, so you have to be mindful of how many credits you're using.
Yeah, and then Jafear. Oh man, he was super excited about this other tool called Manus.
Manus, I'm not familiar with that one.
Yeah, it's MANUS.Kara. I am.
Okay, interesting.
And he was describing it as potentially revolutionary. Like it can automate really complex tasks with just simple prompts, no need to do any complicated setups or write code or anything.
That sounds pretty amazing if it lives up to the hype.
Yeah, but there is a limitation. Currently,
Yeah.
you can only use it 3 times a day. And there was some discussion about where the actual data processing is happening. Jafear thought it might be in China.
Okay, so some potential privacy concerns there.
Yeah, it's definitely something to consider. And Jafear was saying how he thinks Manus could eventually replace a lot of other apps. But there were some concerns about user control and the potential for future costs. What happens if they start charging a lot for it down the line?
That's a valid point with any new technology. You have to kind of weigh the benefits against the potential risks and unknowns.
Exactly. So then the session wrapped up with some really valuable feedback on a demo that Kim shared.
Okay.
So Kim walked everyone through her 5-step social media offer demo flow. It was pretty detailed. It covered capturing a lead, delivering a lead magnet, enrolling the lead in a drip email campaign, and then ultimately booking an appointment.
Wow, so the whole enchilada.
Yeah, it was really comprehensive.
And was there feedback from the group?
Yeah, Diana had some really great suggestions. She thought Kim could simplify the initial presentation a little bit, just to avoid overwhelming people.
That's good advice. Sometimes we try to cram too much information into our demos.
Yeah, and Diana specifically suggested using shorter video clips to illustrate the different steps instead of relying on tons of written notes.
That makes sense. Video is so much more engaging.
Right, and they talked about the timing of when to deliver the lead magnet and how to use those continue buttons strategically to kind of guide the user through the flow.
Yeah, those little details can make a big difference in terms of user experience.
And there was also some discussion about how Kim's flow actually asked for the contact information twice, like once at the beginning and then again when you're booking an appointment.
Okay, so double checking the details.
Yeah, her reasoning was that people might provide fake information initially, just to get the lead magnet, but when they're actually booking an appointment, she wants to make sure she has the real contact details.
That's understandable, but it's also a bit of a trade-off because you don't want to annoy people by asking for the same information multiple times.
Yeah, it's a delicate balance. And they even talked about potentially using Facebook's automatic information retrieval, to pre-fill some of those fields.
Oh, yeah, that could be a time saver.
Yeah, but it also depends on how comfortable people are with sharing their Facebook data.
That's true.
And Kim was really honest. She admitted that she tends to overcomplicate things.
I think a lot of us can relate to that, especially when we're passionate about our work.
Yeah, we want to show all the bells and whistles.
Yeah, exactly.
And a really good idea came out of this discussion, which was to create some simpler, more foundational flows, like a basic lead capture sequence, as templates that other people could use.
That's a fantastic idea. It's like giving people a starting point so they don't have to reinvent the wheel.
Exactly. And before they wrapped up, someone brought up a really thoughtful point about the people who were participating in the session, mostly through the chat, like Blaine.
Okay.
It can be hard to feel included when you're not able to speak up as easily.
Yeah, you don't want those voices to get lost.
And they talked about the importance of actively monitoring the chat, making sure that those contributions are acknowledged, and even incorporating them into the discussion without interrupting the flow of the main speaker.
It's all about creating an inclusive environment where everyone feels valued and heard.
Exactly.
So that was a pretty packed session. Lots of really practical tips and insights.
Yeah, and I think what really stood out to me was the willingness of everyone to share both their wins and their struggles.
Right, it's like we're all in this together.
Exactly, and I think that's what makes these kinds of communities so valuable.
So where do we go from here?
Well, I think the challenge for us, the learners, is how do we take all of this information and actually apply it to our own work?
Right. How do we move from theory to action?
And how do we find that balance between exploring all these new tools and technologies and staying focused on our goals?
Because there's always something new and shiny out there.
Yeah, it's easy to get distracted.
So maybe a good starting point is to take a look at your own digital workspace. How organized are you really?
Yeah, could you benefit from a link hub spreadsheet like Mir's?
Or maybe you've been curious about Notion, but you've been hesitant to dive in?
Maybe Diana's offer of a little tutorial will inspire you.
And as we wrap up, here's a thought-provoking question for everyone to consider. As AI tools become more and more powerful and user-friendly, how will that change the way we think about our online presence?
Will websites as we know them become less important?
Will conversational interfaces take over?
It's something to think about as you plan your own online strategy for the future.
Definitely. Food for thought.
Thanks for joining us on this deep dive. We'll see you next time.
See ya!
That wraps up another discussion on the office hours recap. I hope you enjoyed this week's episode. And as always, come on over and join us in the Discord room every week live at 10:30 a.m. Eastern. See you next week.